Welcome, everybody, to the Robotic Process Automation Initiative at George Mason University. It's a beautiful day here in DC. We're excited to share our latest in a series of webinars on how we can exponentially increase the use of RPA across the public sector. So today, we're going to have a very special guest with us who I'll introduce in just a moment, but I'm going to turn it over to Dornan. We're kind of sidekicks with each other. And Dornan, did you want to talk about kind of the flow of the webinar and what we can expect?
Yes, thank you. Absolutely, David. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. Special session today on process discovery, one of the hottest trends in software automation recently. So it's a pleasure to have Jessa, our guest today, to educate us about what process discovery it is. So just briefly to give you a preview of what we'll be hearing today. What is process discovery? This is very important to understand. Then we're gonna dig into a little bit what are the tools that we need to understand it. Followed by some use cases in the public sector, which is one of our focuses, as you very well know here, the RPA initiative. And then why is this important, this process discovery that everybody's talking about? And also, because we want to keep this conversation healthy and engaging, we kindly invite our audience to keep an eye on the chat box and on a Q&A session. So please feel encouraged to address your questions there. We'll address them at the end of our session, but also maybe within. So I invite you to keep that in mind. And with this, let's hear from Jessa and who Jessa is first, who's representing, who's our guest, and then we'll go there. So David.
Well, thank you, Dornan. It is a pleasure of ours at George Mason University to have Jessa Barnes with us today. She is the practice lead for the intelligent automation team at UDIG, which has companies all over the United States, but I believe she is headquartered down in Richmond, Virginia. She has spent over 9 years working on technology-related projects and initiatives from an analytic and project management role, as well as working with process discovery for automation candidates. Jessa's experience and inquisitive nature allows her to work with clients to understand and map out processes, dig deeper into business problems, and help identify solutions. We appreciate her being with us, and of course, we appreciate UDIG for all the support that they're giving to George Mason University Robotic Process Automation Initiative. So with that, Jessa, I'll throw it to you, and we could talk about process discovery and intelligent automation. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. And just a little bit about UDIG. We're a 21-year-old company based in Richmond, Virginia. We also have an office in Nashville, Tennessee, but we really have clients and team members all over the country, especially in this working from anywhere world that we're in now. We originally started as a staffing company, but in the last 8 to 10 years have made that transition to project-based consulting, which is where we are now. And our areas of expertise are custom software development, data, and intelligent automation. Like David said, I'm on the intelligent automation team. We just started, we're going on 2 years of this team, so really excited to see where it's going. So to get started, what is process discovery? Process discovery is the action of understanding and documenting current state business processes. As it relates to automation, this is the first step you would want to do before any development occurs, which later in the slide, you'll kind of see some examples why. You want to make sure the process in its current state, as done by a human, are laid out and fully understood so that when automated, you're able to make sure the steps are replicated or made more efficient. So the most important thing is that you're getting the same outputs as you would when done manually. So if you wanted to automate someone's payroll process, you want to make sure that the outputs the human would be getting, you're now getting with the automation. Process discovery also involves capturing all possible routes the process can take. So if you have multiple people doing the process, it's probably done different ways. Everyone has their own way of doing things, their own shortcuts. It's second nature to everyone. So you want to identify all the different paths and create the most efficient path for the automation. It could be taking bits and pieces from different people's processes, or one person's process might be the right way to do it. But you want to take that time to fully figure out what is the most efficient route for automation to do that process. You want to identify all the different paths and create the most efficient path for the automation. There's also decision points along the way that needs to be captured. For example, if you're using automation to read documents, you need to be able to identify what type of a document it is. So if it's a W-4, go down route A, and if it's a W-9, go down route B. You want to make sure all of those decision points are captured. Personally, when I'm doing process discovery, I create what is called a process definition document as an output of process discovery. So this lays out who's impacted by the process, what applications are utilized, detailed steps of every step of the process, and as many as exceptions as can be identified. And then you also have a process diagram that really at a high level shows straightforward, here's the process and the different paths it can take. This gives the subject matter expert and really anybody that's interested in the process the most detailed view of the way they do their process today. So there's a few different ways and tools that you can do process discovery and identifying candidates for automation. So the first is manually. You sit down with the subject matter expert, whether in person or through video conferencing. You really just want to be able to see their screen. So if we're doing video conferencing, I like to record it if possible. That way you have something to refer back to. But again, you really just want to be able to see their screen. You observe them do the process through each step at a pace that you can catch everything. Again, this is second nature to people. So what you need to capture, they might not realize is important. They might not realize some of the steps they're doing. So really slowing them down, asking questions, continually ask why they're doing the steps they're doing. If there's any alternate routes the process could take, it really helps them think and it helps you get the best process discovery you can. Typically, you would want to spend 90 minutes to 2 hours to fully be able to watch the process end to end. Probably want to watch it a few times and ask questions. Usually, I like to kind of watch it straight through without interrupting the first time, then go back, ask questions, figure out edge cases, and really try to grasp that. In some situations, you might have access to a test environment that you can click around in and try to repeat the process yourself without having implications on live data. So it's really important if you have that opportunity to try to break the system, see what validation rules you can come up with, try things that you may not have seen when the subject matter expert was showing you. You might be able to find a path to go that they might not have realized. So really just try to click around and do some digging yourself. And then once you have time to digest the process, check in with the subject matter expert and validate you understand the process. The next option is using a task capture tool. This is typically when one process has already been brought to you and identified as automation. It's essentially a screen recorder that sits on the subject matter expert's desktop and it records every action. So you can hit start and stop, hit start, do the process, hit stop. And it will record whether it's a click, a type, moving data, comparing data, anything that's done. And then the output is really step-by-step screenshots and descriptions of each action that's taken to complete the process. So you would see, open Google Chrome, navigate to Microsoft Outlook. In the username field, put your email, hit login. You get all of those steps by using a task capture tool. But again, this is really when you already have identified a process for automation, and it can be used complementary to kind of your manual interview process. And then finally, and most advanced, is task and process mining. So these tools are used when no processes have necessarily been identified, but maybe a team's been identified. So you want to work with the accounting team first or the finance team, and you want to collect possible processes for automation. Task mining, it's similar to task capture, but it's a recorder on the user's desktop behind the scenes that will track all of their actions throughout the day. You can give permissions to what applications it looks at, but it's really just kind of sitting in the background, observing all the processes that the user's doing. And then process mining accesses transaction logs of the whole ecosystem. So the output of these are all the tasks done throughout the identified time period. You set that at the beginning. And then you get process diagrams, all the different tasks and processes that were completed, different routes it could go, the time it takes for each step to be completed. And then some of the robotic process automation tools these days, like UiPath or Automation Anywhere, have these systems built in, so it can help you kind of prioritize those processes as well within their system, giving a return on investment estimation and things like that. So real quick, just to touch on some public sector use cases that might resonate with you and help you start thinking about your processes. I kind of put a list up on the screen. I'm not going to go through all of them, but at a high level, documents. Everyone has documents, especially in public sector and higher education, I'm sure. Whether on paper that needs to be digitized or forms that are already digitized, automation tools like intelligent document processing can read the documents, identify the document type, extract data points, compare data, and move data into different applications or a database. So whether that's documents like a W-4, like I mentioned earlier, student transcripts, applications, health records, anything like that. And then also it can do the same thing with data out of different applications and systems. A lot of times we use the word swivel chair operations. So that could be someone normally goes into application A and then manually types in data from application A into application B. Automation can do that kind of work for you. Automations can file and approve claims based on rules you set. It can make decisions that are straightforward. For example, if the user is older than 18, it needs to follow this process. And if they're younger than 18, they should be declined and shouldn't have anything to do with this process. And then automation is heavily used in back office functions. A lot of organizations really start their automation journey in kind of the back office area because there's so many blaringly obvious use cases there. Creating and approving time entries, comparing data between different locations, validating data, really whatever manual, tedious, and repetitive process that does not require subjective thinking could be potentially a really good candidate for automation and process discovery. So now we're just going to go through a few slides on different reasons why process discovery is so important, especially before you get into any automation development effort. A lot of these will resonate whether you're in the public sector or not. But you definitely want to complete process discovery before you walk into any automation. So the first reason, you can determine if a business process is a candidate for automation before any development occurs by doing process discovery. If you spend the time on process discovery, and the more you do it, the easier it gets, but you can pretty easily tell if it will be a good candidate for automation or not upfront. You'll be able to also give a more accurate level of effort because you'll be able to see what you have to automate, what exceptions, the complexity. You have a really good grasp of it beforehand before you walk into development, so you can kind of put a level of effort estimate on that. Also with that, put a return on investment. You'll be able to see and ask how long it takes someone to do this process. We like to kind of go with the 80-20 rule. If you can automate 80% of it and leave 20% for some exceptions or human intervention, that's really successful. But be able to estimate that return on investment is huge. And then in the event that it's not a process worth automating or capable of being automated, you're saving time and cost that it would have been wasted by your development team had they begun automating and then realized halfway through it wasn't going to work. So you're preventing losing some wasted time and money from your development team. Next, process discovery aligns all parties and makes sure everyone is working towards a successful and mutual outcome. Like I mentioned, an output of process discovery is a detailed documentation of the current state process done by the human. Everyone that has a stake in the process and the automation can review it and agree what is written in the documentation, make any adjustments, review it, and then that serves as the source of truth going forward for the development work. This kind of says, hey guys, this is what we're automating. This is the process we're automating. It also calls out what's in and out of scope for the automation. So in this document as well, you'll see, hey, this is what we're going to automate. This is what we're not going to automate. And everyone agrees on it. Anything outside of that needs to be discussed. So then anything new that comes up that is not in that's not documented from process discovery will need to be reviewed and determine if it can and should be included in the automation. Obviously, it's going to have an effect on time, timeline, scope. So you need to decide, is this something that
Have
should
to
be
text me. I'm on a Zoom webinar. Sorry.
Decide if it should be included, if it should be replaced by something else, or if it's something that could wait to a later phase. So most importantly, process discovery, the output of it is really helping serve your source of truth for everyone to be on the same page. Capturing process steps and exceptions will limit surprises when development occurs, or even, to people that have an interest in the automation and the process. Things will usually always come up during development, it's inevitable, but the more you can identify during process discovery helps limit surprises. Unidentified exceptions, like I mentioned, can change the scope and the timeline based on the complexity of the exception. Another benefit is leadership can be exposed to steps or exceptions in the process that they didn't know was occurring, because they're naturally not very close to the process. It's, the team member that's doing it. So being able to provide leadership of process documentation from discovery gives them that insight. One example I have, we were working with the state agency to do process discovery on a process that the member of leadership thought should take 20 minutes and couldn't understand why it was taking his team days to complete. So we really went in there. We said, let's do this first before we automate. So we documented the process, presented it to them, and it turned out the team was doing way more steps than they thought. And a lot of those steps were actually supposed to be contractually done by a third party. So while we didn't move forward with any automation work, the process discovery opened leadership eyes to what was going on and gave them something to address internally. So it really gives you that insight into the process. And like I said, leadership isn't always necessarily close to the process. So doing process discovery and documenting the process will give them that insight. Next, process discovery allows you to create a backlog of processes to automate. So this could be because you sit with a specific department and spend time observing all of their processes, or utilizing one of the tools I mentioned earlier that helps identify them. So this is really going in, like I said, sitting with a specific department, observing them for a day, half a day, and saying, here's 10 processes we see your team does. Let's create a backlog of what we can automate. This also helps avoid gaps of time between development of automated processes and continues the momentum of your automation journey. A lot of times you run into situations where you'll do discovery, development, testing, deployment of one. So then you have one automation in production and everyone's really excited about it because it's so cool. And then, okay, what's next? Then you start the process over again. So having that backlog allows, once discovery is done and your development team takes over development, you can start on the next process and doing discovery, so that there's always work to do, which helps prevent losing steam. Also, having a backlog of processes helps gain buy-in from leadership. Since you have that backlog of processes to automate, you're able to reach your cost of ownership more quickly. And obviously, your team is most likely investing in purchasing an automation tool. So the quicker you can break even on the cost of ownership, the happier everyone will be, especially leadership. And then finally, at the very least, you have detailed documentation. In most cases, documentation probably didn't exist before, or it wasn't as detailed as you liked before. Again, this is capturing process steps and exceptions. Most people, when they document their process, make assumption of what people do and don't know. But this documentation really lists out step by step with screenshots so that someone can easily replicate it if it needs to be done manually. This helps leadership, this helps the process owner. And again, like I said, if the process owner ever left, they're not taking the knowledge with them. If that's in their head, it's written down somewhere that if this isn't something that's been automated, that documentation exists step by step so that someone should be able to follow it and you don't lose that kind of knowledge. So again, even if automation isn't the next step, a lot of organizations really appreciate the output of process discovery and getting that insight into their process. So that's very quickly, why process discovery is so important, some of the reasons, and I think I'm going to hand it back over to David and Doran for any questions.
David, unmute, sir.
I think it was because I'm sorry about that call. My wife was calling me multiple times. Usually that means an emergency of some case, but I think she forgot I was in a Zoom webinar. I apologize to everybody. But when you start the process discovery and you get all the, basically it all figured out, is there a next step before you go to automation, or is it like process discovery? We check the box and then we bring the automation people in who help us start to solve the problems or create the opportunities?
Yeah, so normally, we'll do the process, we'll do the process discovery. Then we usually like to pull in someone from the development team and we'll walk through it, make sure it makes sense with them. Sometimes we re-engage the subject matter experts to see if there's any questions or if we need any clarification. And then between the teams and someone on the development team, you put together a level of effort. So once you have that level of effort, you'll be able to decide if it's valuable or not to automate. And then you would go into the automation once you decide that, yes, this is something that is valuable and worth automating.
Yeah, and I'm sure the time to complete this is variable, but is there like an average time that people could expect process discovery, if everybody's in on it and they're all fired up, to take place? Does it like take a few days, a week, months, a year? I have no idea.
I usually like to use, 90 minutes to an hour or I'm sorry, 90 minutes to 2 hours to observe a single process is what I like to do to kind of observe it. I usually like to give the week to kind of absorb, put the documentation together, meet back with everyone, and then review and say, hey, this is right. So I would say a week is probably fair, but if you're doing just sitting down and working with someone on one process, I would say 90 minutes to 2 hours just to really get in there and ask the questions.
Yeah. And then, because when talking to people with software automation, how does culture of organizations fit into this? I mean, I know if I've been doing the same thing manually for multiple years, I might be nervous or cautious about seeing people saying, hey, maybe we should automate this, because naturally I go, what does that mean for me and my job? How do you work in culture into the process that you deal with?
Yeah, definitely. That definitely always comes up. Everyone thinks you're automating their job away, but really you're automating the process they most likely don't want to be doing anyway. So that allows them to then be on tasks that are value added to the organization, that are more challenging. The processes that we're automating are ones that are, very low level. They probably don't like doing it, but it's part of their job. So then kind of briefing it with, hey, we're going to take this away from you, but now you're going to do this. That's going to have a huge impact on the organization. It's kind of how we talk about getting, the cultural change going.
Yeah, give them higher value things they could focus more time and energy on, which is great.
Yep.
So Dornan, let me throw it to you.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thanks, Jessa. Very good presentation. I think even the layman would understand, or woman understand process discovery, a critical step in the automation process, that's for sure. But you mentioned a little bit that David asked about the culture change. So what other common internal challenges organizations usually are confronting during the process discovery?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. I think one, the stakeholders or the people that are investing in automation don't truly understand the value of committing the time to perform process discovery. I think, you think, hey, you're going to sit with someone once, see their process and go automate it. But kind of a lot of what I pointed out in the presentation, you really need to capture those exceptions. You really need to dig in. So I think that's kind of one. Stakeholders don't truly understand the value of committing time. Oh, my teammate's busy. Kind of going along with that too, since the process experts are busy, other people try to walk through the process for you. So sometimes the manager tries to do it, or someone else that may have more bandwidth. When really you want to sit with the person that does the job every day, you really want to see what they're doing. To my point about, leadership being unaware of what the team was doing, they think they know what's going on, but they really don't. So really working with the person that does the process. And then you might also figure out that different people do the process different ways. So then you kind of have to tear that apart and see what's the most efficient path for automation. I think that can be a challenge sometimes too, instead of sitting with one person, if multiple people do the job, really see what they're all doing and then kind of piece together the most efficient way for automation.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, have you seen, based on your experience, like people doing it in different ways? Now, what I'm thinking here, like some people are more innovative than others. So, I mean, I'm thinking some of them it's rule-based or that's what we do, but maybe there are 2 or 3 different ways of doing a process or finding a solution to this process. Is that something common that you've seen?
It more often than not, if you have multiple people doing, I think if there's one or two or three, there's usually common knowledge across it. But once you have a bigger team, people learn keyboard shortcuts. People learn if I click here and use it's less steps than going this way, or if I search in this. So the thing with automation is you want the most efficient way, you want the most stable way. So kind of observing the different ways people do it, which upfront seems very minor, really helps you find the most efficient way for the automation tool to, one, do it, and two, be stable to do it. Because there's certain things that an automation can do that's more stable one way than the other. So very minor differences, but people just figure out if I hit Control A, it will select all versus highlighting everything.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, that's very important. I think David wants to ask something. David, you wanted to ask
Yeah,
something?
yeah, I do. Following up on that, are there common mistakes that you see that people make as you're going through the discovery process? For those of our webinar attendees, they're thinking about it, but they're like, what should we avoid doing to make sure we don't spend unnecessary resources and we get the right results?
I think the biggest thing is just don't assume you fully understand the process. You want to make sure you're working with the process expert to validate that you have that understanding. I think, again, like I said, you go through the process once, cool, automate it, done. No, you really want to make sure you fully understand every click, every step, everything, especially when you start getting to decision points or you're messing with money. You really want to make sure you fully understand. So I think that's one common mistake, is assuming you fully understand the process without getting sign off from the process expert. It's always nice to go back with them and read it to them. I've had people say before, wow, you know my job better than me at this point. So just, that's what you want to do. You want to know the job almost better than them so that you can automate it the best way possible.
Right.
And I think too, a lot of people, just a personal thing, people don't like asking people to repeat themselves. You can't be afraid of that with process discovery. You really have to ask people to repeat themselves over and over. And even if they've probably said it 10 times, you want to make sure you understand it. So ask them to show you again or clarify themselves. I think the common theme of everything in this presentation is you want to be able to document and capture every step to the best detail that you can.
Well,
Maybe
that's good.
I have an idea to soften this. Maybe bring a parrot on your right side.
There you go. Why?
Make it a little more. Maybe they would enjoy to hear the
There
parrot
you go.
instead of hearing the other.
And
Yeah.
what is generally, Jessa, when you go through process discovery, what's the likelihood of success at the back end with automation then?
I mean, you're way more likely to be successful. I don't have an exact measure, but I mean, it's definitely gonna be a lot more successful. I think
Right.
stuff always comes up when you start developing anyway. So let's just limit the amount of stuff that comes up by capturing as much as you can up front. I think that's kind of the biggest thing.
And then at least, as you said early in the presentation, at least this isn't a candidate for automation because it's going to be more difficult than we all thought. It's not just pushing a button down and having it all done by a computer.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm. So how about me throwing in a question there? So we heard from you, a lot of what's and how's, but I think something that we commonly hear and we see, and research also shows this, and I think it's one of the still unknown things, or clarifiable things, or who are leading these processes in process discovery. Is it the tech department or the IT department? Is the business operations or other departments, or all together? What did you see? What your observations in a process discovery?
I would say usually it ends up being all together, but best practices for an organization that has a large automation skills to have a center of excellence. So it's made up of people from kind of all over that's helping prioritize, do the discovery, all that. It kind of lives there. You don't necessarily want someone from the business to lead it because they're so close to the process. You want someone that's kind of neutral, coming in almost blind to it. So there's a fresh pair of eyes looking at it. But it's normally someone that's in an analyst type of role. I have a business analyst background, which is why I think, process discovery works so well for me, is because I have that background. But it's really someone in that business analyst role that works independent from the business team. I think that's the big thing, is someone that's not close to the process. It's an analyst that's kind of outside the process. But yeah, best practices these days is a center of excellence. For larger organizations, that's what they do. Smaller ones, you really just want someone that's not close to the process currently.
Mhm. So are you saying that there's a center of excellence specific for process discovery, or there's a center of excellence as a whole that includes process discovery, RPA, intelligent automation, and so on?
Yeah, center of excellence as a whole. So you would
Yeah.
have this whole thing, it would be made up of, you would have, business stakeholders, you would have analysts, you would have IT, and that's kind of where the prioritization lives, and members of that really do the analyst work. And then that kind of passes to the developers who may or may not be part of the center of excellence, but they're close to it. But the center of excellence is more for RP or robotic process automation as a whole.
All right, now thanks for clarifying. And just a reminder for our audience, if you please throw your question. We've seen already questions popping up. That's good. Thank you for those. We'll address them soon. But just a reminder for the rest of you, we're picking your brains here, and you want to ask us or as well as our guest, Jessa. David, maybe.
So I recently had a conversation with someone who is enthralled with the RPA technology with platforms.
Mhm.
And I asked them, well, how's it going? And they said, well, we got it, but we really haven't opened the box yet because we've only been in the company for 3 or 4 years. And I can't reveal that I don't know all the processes.
Mhm.
Like I know what I know, which works because someone trained me, but we don't really know how it all works. Do you ever run into that when you're dealing with people? And then how do you counsel them, or how do you help solve that problem?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think we've dealt with some where, the ultimate knowledge is someone that's not there anymore. And then that really becomes a partnership of working with the closest person you can that's the expert and trying to figure out what the process is. Sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes it's let's compare outputs. I'm going to try to do it over here. You do it over here. And let's see if we're getting the same outputs. I think anyone wanting to start their automation journey and not knowing where to start with process discovery and just start documenting the processes. I think a lot of people are interested in automation, unsure where to start. I would say start documenting your processes, because the first thing anyone's going to do if you were to bring in a third party or in order to automate, the first thing someone's going to say is, do you document your processes? So I think that needs to exist, or at least be willing to bring someone in to help you document that. But that's kind of the biggest thing, is document your processes, and then you can look at it and really decide where to kind of start with automation. I think normally like low complexity, high value cases are really, those low hanging fruit are a really good place to start. But yeah.
Yeah. And we formerly had a gentleman who was at the GSA, and they automated at the GSA. They've done a magnificent job there, I might add. But he mentioned that during the process formulation, they were able to discard a lot of things that were no longer relevant. And do you find that when you're working with people as well? Well, we've always done it this way, but we don't need that information anymore.
Yeah, sometimes it's kind of some encouraging, if it's not something they need, why do we need to keep it? You want the automation to be the most efficient, and automation will run faster than a human as long as it's the most efficient way. So yeah, I think it's also some kind of change management of, we need to, if this isn't necessary, why are you doing this? And kind of coaching them out of that. Sometimes people are adamant and you got to keep it, but I think that's the biggest thing, is finding the most efficient way to do the process. Not every step may be applicable anymore, but like you said, it's the way it's always been done. So there is a little bit of process change management in there too sometimes.
Yeah. And I know maybe it isn't your expertise, but how do you communicate kind of coming in, dealing with people? Because I know for a lot of consultants, a lot of companies, when they come in for the first meeting, usually the CEO, I used to do this, would announce it, would point to the person, everybody would leave, and they'd all be whispering, well, what are we doing next? Do you guys have a process you go through in communication or outreach to keep everybody positive towards any changes in the culture, or positive in the process discovery part of the automation journey?
Yeah, I think, as consultants, we usually have a project team that we work with that has stakeholders, that has business users. Up front, we'll do a whiteboarding session and really do that process discovery. Then throughout the project, including development, we'll have, weekly status meetings where we can demo and show them. I think people really see the value of automation when they can see it. I think it's very hard to conceptualize for someone until they see it. And then when they see it, their mind starts going.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, I don't think there's any magic, but I think just constant communication and showing them what's going on. I think we did one where it was automating a payroll process, and the person that was doing the process was very apprehensive that you're going to have this automatically do what I've been doing and have the same results. But then once they saw the results and do testing and side by side, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's very cool. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's the future. I mean, we've got to figure out a way how we can be more effective and more efficient, but hopefully reduce costs and reallocate labor to higher valued priorities of the company, the
Right.
public sector, academia, whatever the institution you're looking at.
Yeah.
At least that's my opinion. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I agree. We live in a transformational era where things have to be realigned, I believe. But just maybe from let's say if I would be I'm new to this, I'm not really sure if I understand it well. What is this process discovery about? But I'm interested, quickly, I have a limited time that I can, allocate to this. What type of benefits does this process discovery brings, to my, let's say, my organization?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, like I keep saying, is the documentation as an output. Whether or not you're going to automate, you're going to get this really detailed document that lists it all out, exceptions, who's impacted, what applications are being used. So I think that's kind of the biggest hidden benefit people don't realize is the documentation that you get. You also gain a lot of insight into the process that may not have been previously known before. Back to my example, they had no idea all these other steps were being done by their team. They thought a third party was doing it. So you really got this insight that, oh, I thought my team wasn't doing half of this stuff, but they are. So it really gives you that insight into the process to a higher level than just the people doing it. Leadership's getting exposed to all these steps that are being done. And then I think, successful process discovery and investing the time in process discovery more times than not will lead to a successful automation. You can identify up front if it's a good candidate. You can weed out the ones that are not. You identify as many as exceptions as you can, so you know what you're walking into. The next step, we create a solution design document that kind of says, here's the future state almost, and the architecture. And then the process analyst becomes an expert on understanding the process and can translate that to the developer, because that's another thing. Sometimes the developer has a more technical mind than the person doing the process. So having that intermediary that's kind of a quasi expert that really understands it can help kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah. And I guess you mentioned this, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but there's also the worry, I've dealt with this many times. The person in charge gets another job or leaves, and you lose a lot of the important history.
Yeah.
And they say, well, Frank used to do that. Well, Frank's gone now. And like, who's going to make the payroll?
Yeah.
Everyone gets panicked.
Yep. Yep. So having that documentation helps the person that comes after Frank be able to do it and get the same results, and hopefully not take too long to get up to speed.
Right. And does it in a very effective way
Yep.
to keep labor costs down. Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Also sounds to me like, maybe on a personal note here, that feels like this whole activities and tactics is all, it resonates maybe more clearly about, the value or the importance of writing things down, and how having those documented, right, it also helps you as a person when you write them, but also helps the company too. So from an individual to kind of a company.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yep.
that's a very, very good benefit. But before we go into to the audience and ask, address their question, David, do you want to ask anything else? Because we have a few questions and from them too.
Yeah. So without revealing your kind of confidential, what kind of range in cost does process discovery contain? So you do a simple one. Is it like $100,000? Is it relative, without giving costs away? Because I don't want to do that. everybody has specific needs and things which all get
Yeah.
bidded out through the market process. But if I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'm an academic, I want to try to look at some process at a university, and the first step is to get it all written down.
Mhm.
Is that how expensive is all this, Jessa?
I will say it's not as expensive as people probably think it is.
Yeah.
I think if it is a little bit higher than people do think, it's worth it. But I think people would be very surprised. It's not as much as they think it is to invest that money and that time into getting the documentation. And then if it leads to automation, it leads to automation.
Right. Well, that's good, because we always want to talk about being as frugal. I mean, we want everyone to be successful because we believe
Yeah.
in a market economy, but we want people to always understand that this transition to tomorrow can be done in a very responsible, frugal way. And it's not like you're going on the web and saying, let me get automation, and just typing in cost of automation, and somebody says, well, it's going to be XYZ, when it can be much more affordably done by
Yeah.
very competent people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say too, doing the process discovery, also the output, like I said, is a level of effort for development, and that's where kind of the real cost will show up. So being able to do that process discovery, see the value of the documentation, then you get a level of effort. Hey, this is how much it's going to cost to automate. You don't go in spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it would never be that much, but you don't go in spending that much money to do process discovery and then automate. Sometimes you can do, hey, let's do the process discovery as one kind of initiative, so we know what we're walking into cost-wise and time-wise for a larger initiative with development.
Yeah, excellent, good. So Dornan, why don't we open it up to the audience and see what their questions are and continue our conversation.
Yes, our doors have been open since we started. We never closed them. Is that right? Okay, here's the first one, Jessa. I hope you're good at maths, because this is about
Oh,
percentage.
gosh.
What percentage of the general timeline does this discovery process take?
If you mean kind of the whole automation and what percentage process discovery is, normally I would say an average automation that we do is about 4 to 5 weeks of development and 1 to 1.5 weeks of discovery. So I think it's very small, maybe 20%. To heavy lifting 20%, and then kind of sprinkled throughout in case there's questions or clarifications. But it's in the large scheme of things, it's very small. But like I said, it's usually a week and a half. And then the automation is usually anywhere from 4 to 7 weeks, just depending on timing and everything. But I mean, if that helps give an idea of kind of the percentage.
No, thank you. Yeah, I was assuming that probably is part of the whole automation, like the end-to-end automation process. Well, thank you for clarifying that, and good percentages. Matt is been great. Here's another one. I think this is related probably to compliance. Can we check with RPA whether any stage of a project is against the law? What do you think about this?
That's interesting. That's interesting. Can you repeat it one more time?
Yes, absolutely. Can we check with RPA whether any stage of a project is against the law?
To my knowledge, there's no kind of output that would tell you that. But I think if from a process discovery perspective, I mean, you have the steps listed out to kind of dig into and see if anything's against the law, but I don't think RPA has any tools specifically to identify that.
Right. And I might add, Dorn, I think what they're getting at is like HIPAA regulations, academic student regulations. Some of those things are already clear to people who work in the institutions. We can't provide health information to people, even if we think it's confidential. We just can't provide it in an automated process.
Correct.
So that may preclude an automation, but I don't really know of any regulations or rules, as Jessa said, that prohibits the use of automation on processes other than when it deals with individual identifiable personal information. I think that would violate people's privacy.
I do think I think nowadays, though, there's a way to mask some of it. I think there is some functionality in there to mask personal information. But yeah.
No, no, thank you. How about, have you identified any challenges in terms of clarification between process discovery and process mining? I know we talked a little bit earlier about those, but I feel like sometimes there are some people in the community and in this space, it's still, I think we need or one of the challenges is to clarify exactly what each term it means. So you guys, have you bumped into this type of challenges, like process discovery, process mining? Is that
Yeah.
a thing confusing for like what's automatable and for your clients or for?
Yeah, I think process mining is more of a tool to help with process discovery, but I do think process mining is up and coming. I think it's something that it's way more advanced than just your typical task capture, task mining, those kind of steps. I think with process discovery or process mining, you're getting a much larger scale of the organization, whereas some of the more manual or the task capture, the task mining is more kind of specific. Process mining kind of plugs into the whole ecosystem. So you get a lot more data to dig through and a lot more. So I think that's a lot larger investment. I think a lot of larger organizations are really getting into that. Some of the smaller ones might be able to get away with some task mining or some manual work. But yeah, I mean, ultimately process mining is just a tool to kind of help with process discovery and identify processes that could be automated, but it goes into kind of the transaction logs instead of sitting on a desktop or, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. One more, maybe if we can, for you. Where do you see the whole process discovery trend going? Do you see some trends right now in this new world of process discovery from your perspective?
Yeah, I think at least, from our organization, I think we're seeing the value of just any kind of discovery in general, process discovery. Anything is really important before you go into any type of development work. I think the more you're able to get more accurate level of effort estimates, you're able to get more insight into the process. I think it's something that's not something that could be used more. I think people don't really understand the value of it. So I think hopefully, over time, more and more people see the value. I think what we're trying to do is make sure we're bringing in process discovery, regardless of the tool, the software, whatever, just because it's so valuable to really understand the process or understand what people are trying to do. It's having those discussions up front before you dive into anything just helps limit surprises. It helps set expectations. It helps get everyone on the same page. So my hope is that it gets more valued. I think it's undervalued right now. And I don't think people really truly know what they get out of it. But I hope that changes over time.
Yeah. I might, and this may be, and I'm not an IT person, I freely admit that. I'm an economist. So I think about it as more of a proceeding in a very logical way, getting from A to B.
Yeah.
And maybe the process mining in part is forcing us to be thinking through what we do to be more logical with the underpinning of, as you said, do it in the most direct and efficient way possible.
Yeah, I think too, a lot of people are in this agile world now too, but I really like to say that, you should do the process discovery, you should do the solution architecture and the level of effort estimate kind of waterfall before you get into development. Once you're in the development, do agile all day. But I feel like, process discovery and architecting really needs to be more one before the other before you get into agile development.
Yeah, because part of the consequence may be you've got a lot of early costs, which prevent you from having even bigger sunk costs when you can't complete and be successful at the end.
Yeah, especially with automation too, I think, in software development, I'll correct myself. I think you can do process discovery throughout the whole thing with agile for software development, but with automation, it's really getting all the steps up front, because if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And speaking about costs here, I think another question would be here. How many members of a team you have to, let's say, hire from a consultant perspective. I'm the client, is like, maybe I'm limited on my budget. Sometimes these budgets are very constrained. I'm not sure yet how much is, going to cost me. Usually are, I don't know, about 2-3 people, 2-3
Yep.
consultants that I
Usually,
need to
yeah.
start with, or.
Yeah, you usually have, 2 to 3. You would have one developer that's the bulk of the work, and then you would have someone that does process discovery and kind of project management. It doesn't make sense to have a process analyst and a project manager, so kind of having someone doing that dual role. And then you have a solution architect. So the process analyst and the solution architect are really kind of upfront heavy lifting. Then the developer gets into it. So it's usually 2 to 3, but a majority of the cost is going to go towards that developer.
Mhm. Great. All right. Well, we're almost ready here to wrap up, since we want to be respectful of everybody's time. So if there are any last questions here that we would like to address, if not, I think we can conclude and go and enjoy the rest of the day after night learning session. No, David, what do you think?
No, I think so. I think so. Because we want to value your time as webinar participants as well. Remember, one, that we're going to post this on our RPA initiative website at George Mason University. So if you thought about something or if you want to watch it again in a few days, it'll be up there. Number two, many of you have been following us throughout the webinar series. Continue to follow us as well, because we're through the summer session of no school. All the graduate assistants are gone. Well, they're all back now. They all want to be engaging in automation in the future. So we're going to have some more interesting topics. And three, if we don't cover something that you have a specific interest in, don't hesitate to email us. My email is, as you can see, is drare@jmu.edu. And Dornan's is on there as well. And give us suggestions for ideas. We're trying to use the RPA initiative to help accelerate the use of automation in the public sector to make everything work better, cheaper, and allow people to relieve themselves from mundane, needless tasks and to be focused on higher priorities, like actually getting solutions to a lot of things our society faces and solving their problems. So with that, I'll thank everybody for coming and joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again. And again, if you have any ideas, don't hesitate to contact us, because we really want to have this continue to be a collaboration of the private sector, the public sector, people in the business, people interested in the business. And I think that will do all of us a great deal of good going into the future. So thank you and have a great, beautiful day.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
feel free to reach out to Jessa as well. I guess she's very much open. So it is a community here. So thanks, everyone, and
Thank you.
have a great day. Thank you. Thanks, Jessa, for being with us today.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
you.